This is the Panama Canal, one of the world's trade routes. If closed for even a few weeks, could cause a major shock to the entire global economy. It would even affect the strongest economies. Even the economy of the world's most powerful country, America, will collapse.
Panama, you're talking about Panama.
Now let's look at the map. This is San Francisco on the west coast of America, and New York on the east coast. About 150 years ago, traveling between these two cities was not easy at all. Ships had to travel about 13,000 kilometers around South America. But the real problem was the route itself, because this route is one of the most dangerous sea routes in the world, Cape Horn. Here, huge waves, extremely cold water, and sudden and terrible storms have killed countless sailors throughout history. On the other hand, the alternative route to the north goes through the Arctic region, where the sea is covered with ice most of the year. As a result, regular trade is almost impossible there. The Panama Canal was built to solve these two difficult problems by cutting through the narrow landmass of Panama, which has become an important lifeline of world trade today. Currently, about 5 to 6% of global trade is transported through this canal, with a total value of about $400 billion annually. The most surprising thing is the way the Panama Canal works. Can you imagine? The vast Pacific Ocean on one side and the Atlantic Ocean on the other. How are these two oceans connected by a narrow canal? The question is here, how do ships actually move through this canal? What is the mechanism that takes such large ships from one sea to another? And not only that, who built this huge project? What is the history behind it? And why is there so much interest in this canal today, especially in America? The answers to all these questions are hidden in the fascinating history of the Panama Canal. The whole thing will become completely clear if you watch the video to the end. And if you are new to this channel, then subscribe and stay tuned, because more great content is coming. History of the Panama Canal. The time was the end of the 1500s. At that time, Spain was one of the most powerful empires in the world, and this region of the American continent was also under their control. It was during this time that King Charles V of Spain came up with a great idea. If a waterway could be created through this narrow strip of Central America, then the route from Europe to Asia would become much shorter, because at that time there was no Suez Canal. As a result, ships had to travel a long way around the entire African continent to go from Europe to Asia. To implement this idea, the Spanish government also conducted a preliminary survey here. But the problem was technology. It was almost impossible to create such a huge canal with the technology of that era. So this plan remained just an idea at that time. About 300 years passed. The time was the end of the 1800s. The Industrial Revolution was in full swing. European factories were busy producing day and night. And on the other hand, America was also rapidly becoming a powerful industrial power. At this time, one thing became very clear. The country that controls trade would have its future in its hands. And what is most needed to control trade? Fast and efficient trade routes. That is why the idea of building a canal through the Panama region of Central America came to the fore again. It was at this time that the French engineer Ferdinand de Lesseps surprised the world. He opened a new horizon for trade between Europe and Asia by building the Suez Canal. After this success, his confidence increased even more. He thought, if it was possible to build such a canal in Egypt, then it was certainly possible in Panama as well. Then a new chapter began. In the late 1800s, France took on the construction of the Panama Canal. But here they made the biggest mistake. They assumed that Panama and Suez were two similar projects. The reality was completely different. In Egypt, where the Suez Canal was built, it was a completely flat desert. But Panama? The entire region is full of mountains, dense jungles, and unpredictable weather. It rained almost every day, the river water would suddenly rise, and landslides would occasionally occur. Initially, the French tried to build a direct canal exactly at sea level, without any lock gates. But they quickly realized that this plan was almost impossible to implement. Added to this was another terrible problem: disease. Due to the dense jungle, there was a lot of mosquito and poisonous insect infestation. As a result, malaria and yellow fever spread rapidly among the workers. Countless people were falling ill every day, many losing their lives. In just a few years, about 20,000 workers died, which turned this project into a terrible humanitarian disaster. Along with this, there was financial corruption and technical limitations. All in all, the situation became so bad that the French company eventually went bankrupt. As a result, they were forced to completely stop the construction of the Panama Canal. At that time, the Panama Canal project gradually became a symbol of a huge engineering failure. It was such a big setback that many people began to believe that it would never be possible to build a canal in this place. But this is where the story takes a big turn. At the beginning of the 20th century, the United States was rapidly becoming a powerful world power. In a very short time, they realized that if a canal could be built through this narrow land of Panama and controlled by them, then not only trade but also military benefits would be obtained. However, there was a big obstacle ahead, because at that time, Panama was not its own independent country, but was part of Colombia. The United States had tried to negotiate with Colombia several times to obtain permission to build a canal in this region, but each time, Colombia rejected the proposal. And this is where a new chapter began, which is still discussed as a classic example in geopolitics today. In 1903, an independence movement suddenly broke out in the Panamanian territory under Colombia, and the United States began to silently influence this movement. They secretly provided financial and strategic support to the protesters. The then U.S. President Theodore Roosevelt openly supported the Panamanian rebellion. The situation changed further when American warships arrived there. As a result, the Colombian army was practically blocked, and it became difficult for them to suppress the rebellion. Within a short time, Panama emerged as an independent state. Then the United States signed an important agreement with the newly independent Panama. Through this agreement, the responsibility for building and controlling the Panama Canal passed to the United States. In 1904, the United States officially began construction of the canal. Here, their greatest strength was experience. They learned from the previous failures of the French, and those mistakes became their guide to success. How the United States started building the Panama Canal. The first thing Americans did was fight disease. Many experts, including Dr. William C. Georges, understood that mosquitoes were the main cause of the region's terrible diseases. So a massive sanitation campaign began throughout the region. Stagnant water was cleaned, mosquito breeding grounds were destroyed, and modern drainage systems were built. The death rate of workers dropped dramatically, and that's exactly why the canal construction progressed much faster than before. Then came the most important change, the design. Where the French tried to build a straight canal that was exactly at sea level, the Americans went a completely different route. They used the lock gate system. Now the question is, what exactly is this lock gate system? Simply put, it is a type of water-based system where ships are raised or lowered step by step so that they can overcome obstacles of high and low land, because the reality was very difficult. Although the average water level of the Pacific Ocean and the Atlantic Ocean is almost the same, there was a huge mountainous region in the middle of Panama, which is about 85 feet above sea level. If a completely straight and flat canal were to be built in such a situation, the entire mountain would have to be cut down and a large area leveled, which was practically impossible. This is where the French made their biggest mistake, and the Americans corrected it and moved forward with a new design. So now you must be asking yourself, how do ships actually pass through the Panama Canal at this moment? This is where the most incredible engineering concept of this canal is hidden. Imagine if you wanted to climb 85 feet high, step by step from the very bottom floor, what would happen? You would slowly climb up with the help of an elevator or stairs. The Panama Canal also works on the same principle, but here, water is used as the elevator. Yes, you heard it right. When a ship enters the canal from the Atlantic Ocean, it is first placed in a large chamber. This chamber looks like a huge concrete chamber with two gates on both sides. After the ship enters, the back gate is closed. Then the real process begins. First, water is introduced from the upper level into the lower chamber. Gradually, the water level in the chamber starts to rise. And as the water level rises, the ship also starts to rise. When the water level becomes equal to the next level, the gate of that level is opened. Then the ship moves towards the next chamber. In this way, the ship is raised about 85 feet, step by step. Then the ship enters a huge artificial lake called Gatun Lake. Now the question is, how did this lake get here, and what is the need for it? In fact, you can say that this lake is the heart of the entire canal. It is built in the highlands right next to the Panama Canal, where a large amount of fresh water is stored. The main source of water for operating the canal's lock system is the water from this lake. Whenever a ship is raised or lowered, water is used from this lake. That means the entire canal basically works in three parts. First, the ship goes up through the lock system, then it moves forward through the lake, and then it goes down again through the lock system. In short, the Panama Canal is actually a huge water elevator system. This design is so ingenious that even after almost 100 years, ships are still sailing through the Panama Canal using the same technology. After a long construction period, the Panama Canal was finally opened in 1914. On August 15th of the same year, a ship passed through this waterway for the first time. And since that event, there has been a huge change in the routes of world trade. Because with the opening of this canal, ships no longer had to go around the entire South America. Time, fuel, and costs were all greatly reduced. As a result, the Panama Canal quickly became one of the most important routes of international trade. However, America had to spend a huge amount of money to implement this huge project. According to current estimates, the cost of which is approximately $15 to $16 billion. Currently, the Panama Canal has become one of the most important trade routes in the world economy. Every year, thousands of cargo ships use this route to transport goods from one continent to another. Asia, Europe, America, or Latin America, a huge part of world trade now depends on this narrow waterway.